The Vatican City is known around the world as a religious safe haven and one of the most sophisticated places in the entire world. However, sophistication wasn't always the way the Vatican did things. In fact, the Vatican used to be a different, much more disturbing place. People got up to a lot of messed up things, and the worst part is, it was all considered normal. Join us as we explore the creepiest things that were considered normal in Vatican City. So, orgies were a thing. To start off, let's dive into the scandalous side of the Vatican's history that might just make you question your Sunday school lessons. The Vatican is regarded as a place of solemn reverence and spiritual enlightenment, and rightfully so. But when we take a look at history, we see that it also had its moments of, shall we say, less than holy indulgence. Back in the Renaissance, when the popes weren't busy blessing the masses, they apparently had a knack for throwing legendary parties that would make modern music festivals look like a get-together. Now, we're not saying every pope was a party animal, but some of them definitely knew how to have a good time. Lavish banquets with tables bending under the weight of exotic delicacies were commonplace, while the elite of the time engaged in lively discussions on everything, from theology to art, and some less than savory topics too. Popes like Alexander VI, a man who knew how to embrace the finer things in life, allegedly hosted some of the most extravagant, let's call them parties. There are tales of courtesans mingling with cardinals, and some juicy rumors of secret chambers where more than just theological debates took place. And let's not forget the infamous Banquet of Chestnuts, an event rumored to have involved nude dancers, lewd performances, and other adult-themed entertainment. Basically, the Vatican was big on orgies. We can't say with certainty that these parties reached full-on eyes-wide-shut levels, but the rumors exist. It all had a very what happens in the Vatican stays in the Vatican kind of feel. Painters, philosophers, and poets mingling with church officials, engaging in conversations that probably swung between the divine and the downright decadent was a very normal thing. One notorious figure in this story is Pope Alexander VI, also known as Rodrigo Borgia. This guy wasn't exactly known for his saintly ways. He reportedly threw insane parties all the time, and yes, he also held orgies, as did other people at the time. It's hard to imagine one of the holiest places in the world full of people who have sworn celibacy having giant naughty parties. But reality can be unpleasant sometimes. Inquisitions and public executions were normal? Back in the day, there was a time when religious differences could land you in a world of trouble. During this time, the Vatican wasn't exactly the poster child for religious tolerance. They were more, hey, believe what we say or else. And by else, they meant some seriously grim stuff. Now, let's talk about the Inquisitions. These weren't friendly Q&A sessions. These were more intense interrogations that could end in accusations of heresy, witchcraft, or pretty much anything that didn't align with the official party line. The Vatican had a giant magnifying glass, and they were burning heretics like ants under the sun. Being called before an inquisitor was all but a death sentence. They'd grill you, poke you, and make your life miserable until you either confessed or they just got bored. Confessions weren't always the result of divine enlightenment. A lot of times, they were the product of pure desperation of these people to make the pain stop. And then there were the trials. No, not the kind with lawyers and jury duty. These were more like twisted theater productions where you played the lead role in your own downfall. You'd be paraded before a crowd, accused of all sorts of distasteful things. And spoiler alert, it usually didn't end well. Witch hunts? Oh yeah, those were a thing too. The Vatican wasn't exactly known for its love of independent women who dared to question the status quo. Accusations of witchcraft could get you a one-way ticket to the dungeons, where you'd be subjected to torture until you either confessed to flying on broomsticks or dies in the process. And let's not forget the burning. Public executions where you'd be tied to a stake and set ablaze, all in the name of preserving the sanctity of the faith, were a pretty normal thing. So basically, the Vatican City used to be run by senseless dictators and fascists that opposed any opinion that didn't conform to the status quo, and did everything in their power to shut it down. There was a Holy Prepuce episode. Now we're about to explore one of the weirdest relics in Vatican history, the Holy Prepuce, also known as the Holy Foreskin. Yep, you heard that right. We're diving into the tale of a certain body part that somehow ended up becoming a treasured relic. Back in the day, people were all about collecting souvenirs from saints and holy figures. Relics were the hottest items on the spiritual black market, but this relic took things to a whole new level. We're talking about, well, the foreskin of Jesus Christ. Or at least that's what some folks claimed. Now let's pause and think about that for a second. The alleged foreskin of Christ became an actual sought-after piece of history. Can you imagine the kinds of conversations the Vatican bigwigs had when this idea came up? But this was the norm of the time, so somehow this tiny bit of tissue became a star attraction. Pilgrims would travel from far and wide to catch a glimpse of the Holy Prepuce. And if it was weird before, here's where it gets insane. You see, there wasn't just one Holy Prepuce. Nope, There were several claiming to be the real deal. Several people claimed to have the authentic holy skin flake of Jesus Christ himself. In the 20th century, the Vatican finally realized that this was complete insanity and decided to put an end to the Holy Preface saga. They officially said that the debate was over because the relic had been retired, and just like that, the foreskin frenzy was over. Mummified popes were also common. The Vatican was a deeply religious place. It had solemn trials, long prayers, and yes, even mummies. Back in the day when a pope shuffled off this mortal coil, they didn't always get the modern funeral treatment. Nope, some of them were treated to a good old-fashioned mummification process. Now, mummies might conjure up images of ancient Egypt, but it turns out that the Vatican had its own spin on this preservation game. Popes who had passed on were embalmed, dressed in their finest papal regalia, and put on display for the faithful to pay their respects. It was a sort of Pope museum for their devoted followers to come visit once they had passed. Strolling through the Vatican and coming face to face with a mummified Pope, preserved for posterity, was actually a pretty normal thing. These mummies were a reminder of the men who once held immense power and influence within the church, reduced to silent, stoic figures frozen in time. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Some of these mummified popes were decked out in their finest clothes, their faces covered with wax masks to maintain a lifelike appearance. It was like a bizarre blend of the sacred and the slightly morbid, all rolled into one. And it wasn't just about preserving the past. These mummies had a purpose. They were a visual link to the church's history, a tangible reminder of the lineage of popes that stretched back through the ages. It's like the Vatican's own version of a family photo album, albeit a bit more, well, embalmed. Papal death rituals were very weird. So let's peel back the curtain on a topic you might not have considered before: papal death rituals. You see, when a pope kicks the bucket, there's a whole process that kicks into gear, a sort of papal send-off that's been happening for centuries. First off, there's a bit of a waiting game. A Vatican physician must declare the pope's official demise. How does he do it? By striking a silver hammer on the pope's head. It wasn't a superstition, as you might think. It was a way of confirming the pope was dead. Are there better ways to check that? And is that a very creepy way of checking if someone's passed? Sure, but we're not getting into that. The deceased pope was usually moved to his private chambers, where his body was prepared for public viewing. It was a last chance for the faithful to say goodbye. The pope's head was covered with a white cap, his body dressed in full papal regalia, and a rosary placed in his hands. The symbolism was pretty heavy, a powerful spiritual leader entering the afterlife still holding on to his faith. Next up, the body was laid out in state for a series of visitations, a papal wake, where cardinals, dignitaries, and even regular folks could come pay their respects. The Pope's body would lie in a simple cypress wood basket, surrounded by candles and symbols of his office. It was a time of reflection and remembrance, a chance for people to say their final farewells. After the funeral, the Pope's body was usually interred in a crypt beneath St. Peter's Basilica. It's like the ultimate resting place for a man who held immense spiritual authority. A simple plaque with the Pope's name and the years of his papacy marks the spot, a reminder of the legacy left behind. But here's where things get a bit different. Unlike the rest of us, who might go gently into that good night, the Pope's papal ring was traditionally destroyed after his death. It was like a symbolic way of sealing his papacy, of saying, this chapter is closed. And finally, pregnant women were not allowed. As we've already seen, the Vatican was a place of immense religious significance, but was also filled with ancient customs that would leave you scratching your head. Back in the day, it was believed that the presence of a pregnant woman within the hollowed walls of St. Peter's Basilica or the Sistine Chapel could spell trouble. Pregnancy used to be seen through a lens of mystery, and, well, a bit of fear. Pregnant women were thought to carry a certain energy, a potent mixture of life and potential that could potentially disrupt the sacred aura of these holy spaces. So what did they do? Well, if a woman with a baby bump dared to step foot into St. Peter's Basilica, they'd be kicked out. Yep, a good old-fashioned out you go for expecting mothers. What a charming baby shower gift. And this wasn't just about a bunch of grumpy old men telling pregnant women to hit the road. It was rooted in a web of cultural beliefs and the desire to preserve the sanctity of these revered spaces. Fortunately, this banishment wasn't forever. Pregnant women weren't condemned to an eternity of exclusion. Once the little bundle of joy entered the world, the ban was lifted, and the new mother could walk the marble floors of the Vatican without fear of being shooed away. But with modern science and feminism, even the idea of something like this happening seems beyond outrageous and just downright creepy. And those were the creepiest things that were normal in Vatican City. What creeped you out the most? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.